In a quiet American town, a struggling young mechanic spends his days fixing broken machines until one rainy night, a mysterious girl in a wheelchair changes everything. What starts as an act of kindness soon turns into a miracle that stuns the world. When she returns walking from a private jet, like, share and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The sun had barely risen over the small Texas town when Ethan wiped his hands on an oily rag and sighed. The sound of metal clanking and engines humming filled the old workshop where he spent most of his days. At just 28, he already looked older than his years, exhaustion and struggle written across his face. His small garage sat on the edge of town, surrounded by dusty fields and fading signs. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The cracked concrete floor, rusted tools, and smell of gasoline were the closest things he knew to home. Ethan had inherited the shop from his late father, a man who had believed that fixing machines could fix lives. But business had been slow lately. Most people in town preferred newer cars that needed no repairs, and those who came to him could barely afford his work. Still, he never turned anyone away. That evening, dark clouds gathered over the town, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Ethan was about to close the shop when headlights appeared in the distance. A sleek black SUV rolled up to the garage, its tires crunching against the gravel. The door opened, and a man in a suit stepped out, holding an umbrella. From the passenger side, a wheelchair descended. Inside sat a young woman, no older than 20, with long blonde hair tied neatly behind her, and sadness hidden behind her smile. Ethan froze for a moment. The contrast was striking, the luxury car and her frail frame. The rain, the silence. The man approached Ethan, explaining that the young woman's name was Lily Carter, and her wheelchair had stopped working during a trip. She needed it fixed as soon as possible. Ethan nodded, his voice calm but curious. He looked at Lily. Her eyes were gentle yet tired, eyes that had seen too much pain for someone her age. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly. It just stopped moving. The motor's been acting up for days. Ethan knelt beside her wheelchair, inspecting the wiring. I can fix it, he said softly. But it might take a little while. She nodded, thanking him quietly. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but notice the scars on her hands and the faint tremor in her voice. He asked no questions, but Lily, perhaps comforted by his calm presence, began to talk. She told him she had lost both her legs in a car accident 3 years ago. Her father, a successful businessman, had tried every doctor, every prosthetic available, but nothing felt right. Eventually, she gave up hope of walking again. The only thing that made her feel free was her wheelchair. But now even that was broken. Ethan listened silently, every word sinking deep into his heart. He stayed late that night, repairing her chair by the dim light of a single bulb. The rain poured outside as thunder rolled through the sky. When he finally finished, he wiped his hands and tested the motor. It purred back to life. Lily smiled for the first time that evening, her eyes glimmering with relief. Thank you, she said. You don't know what this means to me. Ethan smiled faintly. You don't owe me anything, he replied. Just promise me one thing. Don't stop trying. She looked at him for a moment, as if trying to understand what he meant, then nodded. Before leaving, her driver handed Ethan a small envelope. Inside was a generous payment, far more than he usually charged. But what caught his attention wasn't the money. It was the way Lily had looked back before driving off, the quiet gratitude in her eyes, and something else too, something like hope. Ethan stood in the rain for a long time after the car disappeared, feeling something stir inside him, a strange, unexplainable pull. Over the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The image of her sitting helpless in that chair haunted him. He had always believed machines could make life easier, but for the first time, he wanted to build something that could truly change someone's life. That night he sat at his workbench, surrounded by scrap metal bolts and wires. The sound of rain still echoed in his mind, and Lily's smile replayed over and over. Slowly, an idea began to take shape in his head, a dream that felt impossible, yet necessary. Ethan sketched designs on old paper, mechanical legs, custom-made, light but strong, flexible yet sturdy. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He had never built prosthetics before, but he understood mechanics better than anyone. Machines had rules, and so did the human body. If he could combine both, maybe, just maybe, Lily could walk again. For the first time in years, he felt alive with purpose. Days turned into nights as he worked in secret, scavenging parts from broken bikes, old motors, and scrapyards. His friends thought he was crazy. His landlord threatened to evict him for late rent. But Ethan didn't care. Every time he thought of quitting, he remembered Lily's face, the quiet pain hidden behind her brave smile. That memory fueled him more than food or sleep ever could. He spent hours measuring balance points, adjusting weight ratios, testing circuits. When the first prototype collapsed under its own weight, he didn't get angry. He simply started again. "Failure means I'm getting closer," he whispered to himself. The burns on his hands grew deeper, his eyes darker with fatigue, but he kept going. He wasn't doing this for money or fame, he was doing it for her. One night, as dawn approached, Ethan finally stood back from his work table and looked at what he had built. Two metallic legs gleamed faintly under the workshop light, unfinished but full of promise. They were far from perfect, but they were real. He reached out, running a hand over the smooth surface, imagining Lily's face when she saw them. For a moment, tears filled his eyes. He had spent so long fixing engines and machines that he had forgotten what it felt like to fix something that truly mattered. He wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. Tomorrow he would call her, tell her to come see what he'd made. Maybe she'd think he was crazy. Maybe she wouldn't even try them. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he had built something born not of metal but of hope. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like his hands had created more than a machine. They had built a miracle waiting to happen. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the smell of oil and dust that clung to his clothes, his arms aching from another sleepless night. The two metallic legs gleamed on his workbench as sunlight slipped through the window, landing softly on the silver joints. For a long moment, he just stood there staring at them. They looked so real, almost alive. Every bolt, every hinge carried a piece of his soul. He couldn't believe he had done it, built something that might give a person her life back. But the question still haunted him. Would it actually work? Doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering that he was just a mechanic, not a miracle worker. Still, he pushed those thoughts away and picked up the phone. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed Lily's number. When she answered, her voice was calm but curious. Ethan explained that he had been working on something for her, something he wanted her to see in person. At first, she hesitated. She didn't want to get her hopes up again. She had been through disappointment before, promises that led nowhere. But there was something different about Ethan's tone, a quiet sincerity that made her believe him. Finally, she agreed to come by that afternoon. As soon as she hung up, Ethan felt a rush of panic. What if they didn't fit? What if she fell? What if all of this was just a foolish dream? He took a deep breath and went back to work, tightening bolts and recalibrating the pressure sensors until the very last minute. When Lily arrived, the sky was golden with evening light. She wore a simple blue dress and a nervous smile. Ethan noticed her hands trembling slightly as the driver helped her out of the car. Inside the workshop, the faint hum of machines filled the air, and on the table lay the shining prosthetic legs. Lily gasped softly when she saw them. "You made those?" she asked, disbelief and awe mixing in her voice. Ethan nodded, trying to hide his exhaustion. "I did. They're not perfect, but they're yours, made just for you." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Lily wheeled closer, her eyes glistening as she ran her fingers along the smooth metal. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "Let's see if they work." He helped her onto a support frame he had built for testing balance. His hands were steady, but his heart raced. Gently, he adjusted the straps, fitting the prosthetics against her legs. They clicked into place with a soft metallic sound. Lily's breathing grew heavier, her face pale from anxiety. "It's okay," Ethan said quietly, his voice steady. "Just trust me." She nodded, gripping the frame tightly. "Now try to stand," he said. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, painfully, Lily pushed down on her hands, her body trembling as she began to rise. Ethan moved closer, his hands ready to catch her if she fell. Inch by inch, she lifted herself until she was standing, her first time in 3 years. The moment froze in time. Tears streamed down her face as she looked down at her legs, disbelief and joy overwhelming her. Ethan couldn't breathe. His chest tightened with emotion. She was standing, really standing. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm standing." Ethan smiled, tears glimmering in his own eyes. "You're not just standing," he said softly. "You're walking soon." Her legs wobbled, and she took a shaky step forward. The first one nearly made her fall, but Ethan caught her gently. "Easy," he murmured. "Take your time." She nodded, breathing hard, and tried again. This time her balance held. One step, then another, slow, uncertain, but real. She let out a small laugh that quickly turned into sobs. "I thought I'd never feel this again," she cried. Ethan's voice was low, almost breaking. "You did this. I just built the pieces. You gave them purpose." They spent hours practicing, Lily taking small, careful steps, while Ethan guided her every move. He adjusted the alignment, made minor tweaks to the control sensors, and taught her how to shift her weight naturally. With each step, her confidence grew. By the end of the evening, she was walking slowly around the workshop, her laughter echoing off the walls. Ethan leaned back against his workbench, exhausted but smiling. For the first time in his life, he had seen a miracle happen before his eyes, and he had built it with his own 2 hands. When they finally stopped, Lily turned toward him, eyes full of tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You gave me back my life." Ethan shook his head, smiling softly. "You don't owe me anything, Lily. Just promise me one thing, never stop walking." She laughed through her tears, nodding. "I won't." The night grew quiet. The sound of rain had returned, tapping lightly on the roof, as if echoing the night they had first met. Ethan walked her to the car, his heart heavy and light all at once. Before she left, she turned back to look at him. "Ethan," she said softly, "you didn't just fix something broken, you fixed me." Then she got into the car and drove away. When the taillights disappeared down the road, Ethan stood alone under the dim streetlight, the sound of crickets filling the air. He felt an ache in his chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and a strange sadness. He knew she would move on with her life now, and that made him happy. But part of him also wished she'd stay a little longer. He returned to his workshop and sat by the workbench, staring at the empty chair where the prosthetics had been. He thought of his father and the lessons he'd learned growing up, how real success wasn't about money or fame, but about changing lives, even one at a time. And tonight, for the first time, Ethan understood what that truly meant. As dawn broke, light filtered through the dusty windows once again, and Ethan fell asleep at his desk, his heart full. Somewhere deep inside, he knew his life was about to change forever, but he didn't yet know how much. The next morning, the town was unusually quiet. The sky shimmered with pale light, and Ethan's garage smelled of metal, oil, and old memories. He hadn't slept much since Lily left the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing again, her trembling steps, her tears, her laughter. It didn't feel real, yet every detail played in his mind like a movie. For the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had no idea that something far greater was already on its way to his door. By noon, the sound of engines roared through the sleepy town. Ethan stepped outside, squinting against the bright sunlight. A sleek private jet was descending toward the small, rural airstrip on the edge of town, a place where no one important ever landed. The few townspeople who noticed stood in awe, whispering to each other. Within minutes, a convoy of luxury cars appeared, driving down the dusty road that led directly to Ethan's workshop. Confused, Ethan wiped his hands on his rag and stood by the entrance, unsure of what to expect. The first car stopped right in front of him, and when the door opened, he froze. Lily stepped out, radiant and confident, her golden hair shining under the sun. But she looked completely different. Gone was the shy, uncertain girl in a wheelchair. Now she stood tall and strong, walking gracefully on the legs he had built. She wore a crisp white suit and carried an air of confidence that turned heads. Ethan couldn't find his voice. "Lily, you—" She smiled warmly and walked up to him. "I told you I wouldn't stop walking," she said, her voice full of emotion. Before Ethan could reply, another figure stepped out of the car. A tall man in his 50s, dressed in a dark, tailored suit. His face was familiar. Ethan realized with a jolt that this was Robert Carter, the billionaire founder of Carter Tech Industries, one of the biggest technology companies in the United States. He had seen his face on magazine covers and television interviews. Robert extended a hand and said with a smile, "So, you're the young mechanic my daughter won't stop talking about." Ethan was too stunned to respond immediately. He shook Robert's hand, his mind spinning. I just wanted to help," he finally said. Robert nodded, looking around the small, dusty workshop. "You did more than help. You gave my daughter her life back. I've spent millions trying to find a solution, but nothing worked until she met you." His voice softened as he turned to Lily. "She stood in front of me this morning. Ethan, I hadn't seen her stand in years." Ethan's throat tightened. Hearing that from a father carried more weight than any award could ever give. Lily stepped forward and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I wanted to surprise you," she said. "You deserve to see what your kindness has done. My father wants to invest in your work. No, he wants to partner with you." Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Partner?" Robert smiled. "Yes, we want to fund your designs. You have an incredible gift, Ethan, an engineer's mind and a heart that truly cares. With proper support, you could change thousands of lives." Ethan was speechless. He looked around at his worn-down tools, the peeling paint, the old machines, this tiny garage that had barely survived month to month. "I'm just a mechanic," he said quietly. "I don't even have the education for something like that." Robert shook his head. "Education can be taught. Compassion can't. My team will handle the logistics. We just need you to build." Tears stung Ethan's eyes, but he tried to hold them back. All his life, he had worked in silence, ignored by the world. Now the world had come knocking on his door. Lily smiled through her own tears. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Now it's our turn to believe in you." The next few days were a whirlwind. Reporters arrived, cameras flashed, and articles spread online. Small-town mechanic builds custom prosthetics that changed a billionaire's daughter's life. People from across the country began reaching out. Parents with disabled children, veterans, hospitals, charities. They all wanted to know if Ethan could help. For a while, it was overwhelming. But with the support of Carter Tech, Ethan's small garage transformed into a full-scale workshop. Engineers and medical specialists joined his team, working under his guidance. The first prototype line of Carter Mechanics prosthetics was born, a collaboration between a billionaire's company and a humble, small-town man. Despite all the attention, Ethan stayed the same. He refused luxury offices or expensive suits. He still wore his old denim jacket and oil-stained gloves, working side by side with his team. The only difference now was the purpose behind his work. Every prosthetic he built carried a story, a life waiting to be changed. And every time someone walked for the first time, he saw Lily's face all over again, the pure joy of standing tall. Months passed, and the company grew beyond anyone's expectations. They opened clinics across the country, providing affordable prosthetics for children and veterans who couldn't afford them. Ethan's name became known nationwide, but fame never interested him. His reward was in every smile, every tear of gratitude from those he helped. One evening, after a long day at the new facility, Ethan found Lily waiting for him outside. The setting sun painted the sky orange and gold, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. She was no longer just the girl he had helped. She was now his closest friend, his inspiration. "You look tired," she said softly. Ethan laughed. "You sound like my mom used to." She smiled, walking beside him. "Do you ever regret helping me that night?" He looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Not for a second." "That night changed my life." She nodded, her eyes shining. "You changed mine first." There was a quiet pause between them, filled only by the sound of the wind. Then Lily said, "You know, my father wants to open a new branch overseas. He asked me to lead it, and I told him I'd only go if you agreed to come." Ethan looked at her, startled. "Me? I'm not exactly the corporate type." She laughed softly. "You don't need to be. You just need to keep doing what you do, building hope." For the first time in a long while, Ethan let himself dream beyond his little town. He realized that sometimes destiny doesn't come in the form of money or fame. It arrives quietly, in the shape of a broken wheelchair, a rainy night, and a promise made from the heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan looked up at the glowing sky and smiled. "All right," he said finally, "let's keep building miracles." And from that day on, the story of a struggling mechanic and a girl who learned to walk again became a symbol of kindness across America. A reminder that one selfless act can lift not just one life, but the entire world around it.